Look, the biggest podcast where you can learn them lessons. Line for line where you can learn from different sections. Made it out the mud, come tell your story, blessings. Never know who listening, never know who stressing. Devon gave you a voice, come speak your honest truth. Line for line, go bar for bar, it's up to you. Wanna talk sports, gov, and politics? Wanna talk about where you from and your accomplishments? The Line for Line is really where you need to be. A platform that's really made for folks like you and me. You can find it all no matter what you seek. Whether you calling or you listening, tune in every week.
All right, guys, we are back on another episode of Line for Line. I have a very special guest in the building today. A special guest who I won't even say anything. I'll let him introduce himself to you guys and all of his accolades and what he does and where he.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Lester Wiltfong, editor-in-chief at Windy City Gridiron. You can also catch me on Twitter at WiltfongJR. And, of course, I got a podcast, T-Formation Conversation, on the Windy City Gridiron podcast channel.
Yes, sir. And how are you today, sir?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm actually pretty sad right now coming off of this second preseason game. I've been telling all of my friends that it's literally been feeling like the regular season for me. But today, I feel like the regular season, or at least I didn't want it to feel like that.
Well, you know, the buzz was there with Justin Fields. You know, like you said, it felt like the regular season because we all want to see these games. And then, of course, this game happens and the Andy Dalton offense doesn't look very good. And then Justin Fields gets in and his offensive guys around him is kind of sketchy. And it's like, oh, but, you know, it's practice. It's preseason. And there are still some positives to glean off this terrible performance.
Now, as someone who sits in on the camps and gets a close look at the Bears, what is it about Dalton that you see them saying Dalton is still their guy?
You know, I think the biggest thing right now is obviously Matt Nagy has a plan. You know, he believes in the plan of the veteran getting the nod and having the rookie earn the QB1 spot from him. But, you know, it was something I talked about on Twitter today. I just think at this point, for a young quarterback, he has to understand the pass protection. And it's something that ESPN's Louis Riddick mentioned on a podcast earlier this week. Once Justin Fields has a complete grasp of the pass protection, the sets, you know, where the guys are sliding to, you know, if the back is a check release before he leaves, you know, goes out for his pass, you know, where the hot read is, where the free rusher's coming from. Once Justin Fields has a full grasp of that, then you may see the change. But until he has that fully down, I mean, I like everyone, I want to see Justin Fields play. He's more exciting, but I also don't want to see Justin Fields get hurt if he doesn't understand where the blitz coming from. And we kind of saw that today in the second half. You know, there was a guy blitzed off the edge. He didn't recognize it. And again, it may not have been his fault. It could have been a miss up front. It could have been something with the back. But he didn't recognize it and he got blasted. So, you know, let the rookie know what's going on first and foremost. And once he does that, then let's make the switch. And then again, I think the switch to Field should be organically. I would love to see him win the job outright so the whole team knows, hey, it's Justin's time, rather than, oh man, Andy Dalton sucks so bad we have to go to the next guy, because that's not good for the franchise.
There's just a lot of variables in there as well too of when I believe that we will see Justin Fields. For me, my gut says we won't see him until around November, the December months, you know, and that's when they're approaching a couple of their, I wouldn't say easier games because all 32 NFL teams are professional, but the lighter of the load, you know, so you're looking at 4 or 5 games down the stretch where you have like a Detroit in there, a Minnesota in there, you know, it's not really necessarily powerhouses that he's going in there facing. Let's say not going into Pittsburgh and getting ready to start there, or Casey or anything like that. But like you said, I wanted to see it come organically, you know, and a lot of people realize, they forget that Andy Dalton's a professional. He can win games, you know, he's not just some slouch. Granted, he's been kind of looking kind of iffy this whole preseason and before that, but he's still a professional, and I believe he can go in there and win a couple of games.
He has the pedigree. I mean, he's not the same Andy Dalton that went to 4, or 3 Pro Bowls with the Bengals years ago. He's not that guy, you know, but he's also not the same guy that kind of looked lost at times last year with Dallas. I mean, that Dallas offense was really riddled with injuries last year. So that's why, you know, one reason why he didn't look as good coming off of that season. But like I said, he's a pro. You know, he's been in the league for a long time. You know, he can at least give you a competent offense, and he can buy you time to get you to Justin Fields. And And I'm like you, I don't think we're going to see him early. I think we will see Justin Fields at some point. I think there are a few natural spots in the schedule where it makes sense. Maybe week 4, maybe after the bye. But again, if it's an organic switch and everyone in the whole building knows, hey, it's Justin Fields' time. And I think that's the best way to make the switch. Otherwise, like I said, you're forcing him in action, and that's not really good. You want to make sure he's ready, the team is ready, the offense is ready, and then once the switch is made, the next 10, 12 years, it's all Justin Fields.
What type of guy can you see him being? Like, let's say he were to start around week 4, week 5. Just tell me what you think the stats will look like if we do see.
I mean, if you look at his college tape, everything he's done, he's always been the man. I mean, he's always has that aura around him. I think at this point, as a rookie, if he is kind of thrust into action a little before he's got, the full grasp of the playbook, the full grasp of the pass pro, if we kind of see him thrust into action a little too early, you'll see a lot more runs. I think he's just such a great athlete. He's so fast. He has legit 4.4 speed. I think if he gets in the game, you may see more design runs possibly. I think Nagy, this is a big year for Matt Nagy, the play caller. He has to really show that he can do it at this level. I think there's some questions, with him with the last few years in Chicago. He has to really prove it this year. He's got his guy in Fields. He has his guy in Dalton. To an extent, he has this guy in Nick Foles. So Matt Nagy has to show that this year that he is truly an NFL play caller.
Unfortunately, I just don't believe in him. I'm sorry. And he got a lot of credit for being under Andy Reid. If you look at it, that was Andy Reid. Matt Nagy really wasn't the genius or the play caller, and it showed last year when he gave up the plays to Bill Lazor, and then as soon as Bill Lazor took over play calling, you see, now they're moving the ball, or now they're opening up the playbook. It looks really, really good. And I think that he needs someone on his side that can help him better through that. And it's okay that that's not you, but I'd rather him take his head out of his behind and understand, okay, I need some help with this. Let me bring someone in who can help me with the play calling or relinquish play calling altogether.
It's definitely fair. I mean, the offense did look better last year when Bill Lazor took over, but also, the offense is, for lack of a better term, the offense was really dumbed down last year when it was with Mitch, and there were certain things they couldn't do. They did a lot of the boot slide offense, a lot of stuff that we saw with San Fran, a lot of the bootlegs, and that kind of cuts the field in half for the quarterback and makes things easier on him. And we saw some success, but then we also saw when they got against the Packers week 17, we saw against the Saints in the playoffs, keeping things simple on offense isn't always going to work. And that's kind of where we saw the stuff with Trubisky fail towards the end. And again, that's what I'm saying, that this year, Matt Nagy has to prove it that he can do it at this level. And, if he struggles, maybe you go back to Bill Lazor again this year. But like you said, it's not the worst thing for a head coach not being able to be the primary play caller. But that's why he was brought in. He was brought in to Chicago because he was an offensive guru. So if it doesn't work as a play caller and if the Bears struggle this year, maybe Matt Nagy's gone.
3 things that I really wasn't thinking on too heavy. I was thinking on them, but today definitely showed it. There's 3 things on the offense that concerned me, and we'll speak on these 3 things. The offensive line, the receiving group, and then the running backs outside of David Montgomery. So let's touch base on the offensive line first. How sold would you say you are on this offensive line, even with Tevin Jenkins' injury, excuse me?
I want to see the starters. I want to see the starters play at tackle. I mean, right now the Bears have been putting Lashavius Pig Simmons at right tackle. He's been playing all the reps there, and I think he has some promise. I just don't want to see him starting. I think he's a guy coming from a small school. He needs a little more time to develop, and he may become a guy down the road that's serviceable as a swing guy. But as far as your starting right tackle, Simmons ain't it. They're missing a guy like the starter is it Fetty? He's supposed to be back at some point with a hip flexor. Larry Borum, the rookie, he has more potential than a guy like Simmons. And then on the left side, again, Elijah Wilkinson had a decent game against the Dolphins last week. He struggled this week. He's not it. His Broncos tape was bad. He's not a guy that you want to have starting left tackle. So let's see what Jason Peters has if he plays this coming up next week against the Titans. 39 years old. He's an old aging vet. He's got some tricks. Does he have the athleticism to still play at a high level? we'll see. But I know one thing: he won't be as bad as a guy like Wilkinson at left tackle.
And he brings like a high level of veteranship, if that's even a word right there. But he's like
Yeah.
definitely a veteran that can coach those young guys like a Tevin Jenkins, a Larry Borum, and even just help the guys all around be better. When you look at a move like that, a 39-year-old, they say, okay, well, we do know the Jenkins injury is kind of serious, so let's go get us a veteran who knows his role, knows his game, who's been to the promised land, with the Pro Bowls and all pros. So that's definitely a guy that they can lean on to help those young guys there. So what would you rate them right now? Like kind of 1 to 10 of like going into the season. What do you rate the offense?
The way it looks right now, you can't go any higher than a 5, But if Peters comes in there and he looks, better than average, if Jermaine Ifedi gets his spot at right tackle and he looks like he did, how he kind of finished the year last year, and then you get James Daniels back from his injury. He's back practicing, but I think he missed today's game. They're kind of being cautious with him, But if you get your current projected starters all in there, I think this unit can be above average. But again, they got to get healthy. They got to start, building the continuity within themselves because they haven't played with each other. So get them all out there, get the starting out there, and they can be above average if things go right for them. But the injuries could kill them.
How concerned are you with the Jenkins injury?
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, the Bears really slow played it. They kind of said it was no big deal, back tightness. But the longer it kind of went, as Bears fans, we're kind of used to this. The longer it kind of goes, you kind of watch what happens. Then they sign Jason Peters, and everyone know, oh, here it is. Something's going to happen. And even Coach Nagy said it has nothing to do with the signing, with his injury. But we kind of knew something was up. And then, of course, back surgery. And then, from what the guys experts are saying, nothing has been actually out there specifically. But what they're saying is it was a minor procedure. I guess as minor as a back injury can go, but apparently several players have had the same procedure, throughout the league. They all come back with no problems, and they're saying that this should clear up all his issues in the past as well. So if that's the case, he comes back. It may not be this year, but at some point, I just loved his tape at college. He's just a mauler.
Definitely a maul. Yeah. Jinx, you owe me
I hope he's the guy. Yeah, I hope he's the guy, but, we got to wait and see.
Yes, sir. Now let's transition into this receiving core that we have. Outside of Allen Robinson, what is it that we can expect from this receiving core? And not to take anything away from Darnell Mooney. Obviously, he's a speedster, take the top off of a defense as well too. But Allen Robinson is just a dog,
Well, this receiving core right now, when you watch them play the last 2 weeks, there's not a lot of separation. They have some issues, but again, you're watching them play, and it's Chris Lacey, it's Rodney Adams, it's John Vea Johnson. It's not your premier starting guys that you're counting on. So at some point, we should see the starting unit play. Hopefully they all get out there at some point. It's going to be Goodwin, it's going to be Bird as your top reserves, I would imagine. Those guys are speedsters. You pair those guys with Mooney and a guy like Robinson, who's, like I said, is a dog. I think the receiving core can be good, but the last 2 weeks, a lot of drops. That's been the big theme in camp this last week too. Those receivers have been dropping a lot of balls, and not just them, the tight ends too. So, it's the doldrums of camp right now. But hopefully, as they progress through and get to week 1, they'll have their act together.
Yes, sir. Now, are there any guys that you expect to make the roster versus guys you don't? And defended Javon Wims season after season after season. Like, no, I like the guy. The guy got talent. I'm so ready for them to cut this guy. It doesn't make any sense.
I like the story of Javon Wims, a real late draft pick, kind of worked his way into the lineup. I like this story. And then last year he had the stupid punch he had, and then he had some drops and some mistakes, some penalties. And you're like, well, what's the point? He doesn't bring enough value to the roster at this point to keep him around. And we saw a guy today in Adams, a guy like Rodney Adams. He'll be 27 next month. He's an older guy, but he's never really had a chance to make an NFL roster. I think the Bears are maybe his 3rd or 4th team. So here's another guy, real nice story, worked hard, and now he finally has a spot where he may be a lock there for that 6th or 7th spot in the roster. Because like you said, Wims, I think, is gone. Ridley, I think, may be gone. So the Bears are going to go with, at the bottom of the depth chart at least, some new blood.
What's the story behind the Ridley thing? I know that they moved up to get him. The kid, his brother's a great NFL talent. Do you think it's just he hasn't been given a chance? Because he's made a couple of plays for the Bears, but it's just like, why haven't you taken off yet? Especially with a guy like Miller being shipped off. You would expect this guy would step up and take in. Granted, it's only preseason, but I just wonder what's the story with him.
The last couple of years, why he couldn't get on the field because he didn't play special teams. So really, the only time he played is if a guy like Robinson was injured, because he was your backup X receiver. So this offseason, Ridley actually has worked on his special teams. He played some special teams and against the Dolphins. I haven't checked the snap counts yet for this week, but I'd imagine he's playing special teams there as well. So I mean, if he proves he can play your specials, maybe he sneaks into the roster over whims, but again, he's another guy that he had a flag last week. I think he had a drop again this week. He's had some drops in camp. He's definitely feeling the pressure from guys like Adams, from Johnson. He's feeling the pressure. So, like you said, that the talent was there in Georgia. He looked good. He looks like a guy that could play at this level. The Bears moved up to get him. It just hasn't worked out for him. This is probably his last chance to make the Bears, and we'll see as this week of practice comes up. We'll see what happens in the final game against the Titans, and if he's not playing much, maybe that's the writing on the wall for him.
Yes, sir. Close to him, and then we can obviously move on to the running backs, which is the most pristine position right now that the Bears have to rely on. But obviously, with a guy like Cohen coming back from an injury, we still have no word on him of when he's going to practice and when he's going to play. What do you think about that predicament?
Yeah, when I was at camp this last week, Cohen was doing some work on the side. He still, hasn't been cleared from the PUP list, but from what I saw, he wasn't limping. I know there were some reports out there saying that he looked like he may have been having some injuries walking, but when I was there, he seemed to be walking fine. He was jogging, running. He was doing some stuff with the sled, with the pull and the push of the sled. So he's working his way back. He's still not there yet. But again, he had surgery in September last year, so it's not even a full year since he's had his surgery, and that injury typically takes about a year. So we may not see him until midseason, and if that's the case, it's up to guys like Montgomery obviously to pick up the slack as the starter. A guy like Williams has to come in to be the number 2. I think they really like Khalil Herbert. There's some good depth at that running back spot, but as we saw last year in midseason, when the O-line is struggling, makes it hard for those guys to make plays. And again, we looked at what happened today against the who the hell did they play? I'm already forgetting who they played today. Man,
oh my God.
Bills, but it's like, today they had 2 tackles you don't want to really be starting. James Daniels was gone. So I think once you get your starters in, once you have a better a unit up front, the tailbacks should be able to make a little hay this year.
And it all depends on, because I did see that Nagy said he plans to run Montgomery this time around. But we shall see, because Montgomery's a guy who should touch the ball at least 20 to 25 times a game. Run him, grind him until the wheels fall off, until you can't anymore. And then that's when you bring in another back, But like I said, we haven't seen that from Cohen in quite some time. As soon as Cohen touches the ball, it's straight to the sidelines, And we're hoping a guy like Williams can come in and be that difference maker, And from what I'm hearing, he's even putting that fire under Cohen as well, too, that he's coming for that roster spot, the number 2. So we shall see, because they really are deep at running back right now. If you look at a guy like, obviously, Artavius Pierce, who's like low on a totem pole but can still get in there and get you some touches. Khalil Herbert bringing speed with size. Williams and obviously Montgomery's going to get his. So, hey, it can be up for grabs with this running back room right now, I believe.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think this is the most talented tailback room the Bears have had in quite some time. They've had a guy like Ryan Null on the roster the last few years. He's kind of there more for special teams. He's not a running back in the NFL per se, but as a guy on the bottom of the depth chart that can play all your special teams, he's quality, and he may be off. He may be gone this year. A guy like Pierce, you mentioned, may be gone this year. They really like CJ Marbell. I forgot to pronounce his last name, but they like him too. They like him as a guy undrafted free agent. So, there's some guys that are going to get cut that should come back to the practice squad for the Bears.
Seeing from the defense while you're out there at camp?
I was only there the one day this last week. The way they kind of work the camp this year, they're really limited in their tickets and stuff. But I've talked to a lot of guys that have been there. A lot of the beat guys I talked to quite a bit that have actually seen that's going on, and everyone tells me that the defense is far ahead of the offense still. This last week in practice, especially, the defense really stepped up, which kind of makes you look at the game today against the Bills. And you're like, man, this defense got torched. But again, they're doing a lot of vanilla stuff. They're not really trying to show their whole hand here. Coach Sean Desai, he wants to do certain things in the back end with some of the skies coverages. We're probably not seeing that in preseason. So it's going to be hard to really judge what this defense can be, until we see them really bring it all out there. And that may not be till week 1 of the regular season.
So I believe that they hold back a little bit when it comes to the preseason, right? Obviously, they're not going 100%, or they're not trying to go deep into their playbook, obviously, correct? So but
stuff that Sean Desai wants to do with because he wants to do a lot of stuff with the too high shell, a lot of rolling the skies coverages, and you don't want to really show all that because again, a lot of people know what you're going to do because it's similar to the Vic Fangio stuff we've seen in the past, but still, he's not going to show some of the blitz packages he has. He'll hold that back and save those for the Rams.
do you expect the defense to take a step forward under new management with Desai?
I hope so. I like the Vic Fangio style, and I like Sean Desai as a person. Every time you see this guy talk, he's just, the coaches love him, the players love him. Everyone has nice thing to say about Sean Desai. He survived the Mark Trestman years in Chicago. This is how much the organization loves Sean Desai. He's been around for a long time. He served under 3 different D coordinators. So if Sean Desai can take that step and he can kind of take the Vic Fangio scheme, which is really, really hot right now in the NFL. If he can take that and put his own spin on it, there's a good chance that in a couple of years he's a head coach somewhere in the league as well.
My biggest thing, and I say this to my friend Alex all the time, is Jalen Johnson really ready for that number 1 role? And I'm not taking anything away from him because the kid came out last year and balled, but obviously the shoulder injuries crept back up on him. But is he ready for the number 1 spot?
He sure as hell better be because he is the man now. I mean, he is the CB1. The Bears cut Fuller. I thought he had a lot of nice tape last year as a rookie, but you said he had a shoulder injury. He played much better earlier, and then when he kind of hurt his shoulder, and I'm not sure when he actually hurt it to where he was bothering his play, but you can kind of see his play taper off a bit. But again, that happens a lot with rookies as well. They kind of there's always a wall there for some rookies, and he may have hit it. Going into this season, he's ready. He definitely is talking the game. He had a nice first half against the Bills today, a few pass breakups. He's at a nice training camp as well. So Jalen Johnson, will he be Kyle Fuller? I'm not sure he'll be that guy, but I think he has the potential to be that as good as Kyle Fuller is.
Now let's move around the field a little bit, and we'll go back to the defensive backs. But what's up with the linebacker play? Obviously, we know Roquan's definitely locked in as a starter, and then obviously Trevathan, whose age continues to show. And I'll say this too, I honestly would have kept Kwiatkowski over Trevathan. I was so sold on Kwiatkowski. He really went in there and played his heart out. He was showing Chicago how hungry he was and how ready he was. But obviously they kept Trevathan for money reasons, But the only thing between the two is me that I thought Trevathan was just a little bit better in coverage than Kwiatkowski was, but Kwiatkowski was a brute force back there.
Well, you had to figure at Trevathan's age that the better coverage that he had over Quit, you had to figure his age would drop off at some point. So in that situation, both players got similar money, but the Bears gambled on the veteran leadership of Trevathan. That's kind of why they made that decision there. But I'm with you. I rather would have kept a guy like, a guy they drafted. They drafted Kwiatkowski. They developed him. He had kind of a nice run a few years. Then he really had a really big season his last season there. And that got him the big money deal with the Raiders. He was voted their team captain, his first year in. So, he came in and earned the respect of that locker room, which is what he did in Chicago as well. So at the inside linebacker spot, you talk about it. Yes, it's Roquan, it's Trevathan, but they really like a guy like Ogletree they brought in. He's really had a hell of a camp, the last, 10, 11, 12 days, however long he's been there. He definitely has a place on this roster. And you may see more Ogletree in some sub packages instead of Trevathan. Because like you said, Trevathan was a better in coverage. That kind of slipped a little bit. He's 31, I think, now with Trevathan. He's more of your classic run plug-in guy on the inside there. And Ogletree cut 20 pounds. I think he may be actually a similar age. I think he may be a year younger. But as far as coverage goes, he's a little better movement in space. So you may see him play a little more. Plus, they have Christian Jones they brought in. They like him.
Familiar face.
Linebackers, but the moves they made the offseason, they really bolstered that spot. And now you have to look at it and say that's a strength of this team.
Nice. Now let's talk a little bit about this defensive line. Obviously, we know guys like Mac, he's there. We got Goldman back, Bilal Nichols, Akeem Hicks, definitely a surefire, and they're even getting productivity out of the guy Kairos Otunga, however you say it, Tunga. How do you see this defensive line playing out? Because if you look at the losses that we did lose, we lost a guy like Roy Robb, who was really out there doing his thing as well too.
Yeah, I think the overall D line is going to be, it may be the strongest unit the Bears have this year. You mentioned all those guys they get coming back. That you mentioned like Tonga, who they drafted in the 7th round. He's definitely going to be a keeper this year. He's going to be a true nose tackle backup behind Goldman. They got a guy like Angelo Blackson came in as a free agent. He's solid. There's some depth up front, but it all starts with Goldman. It all starts with Hicks and Nichols. Those three guys are a good threesome as any in the league. Nichols did leave the game today with a foot injury. I haven't heard how severe that is. I missed the post game presser. Hopefully it's not that big a deal. I know the Bears PR didn't tweet about it during the game, so hopefully it's fine. But they need him because he's primed for a big year this year. He's going into his 4th year, which is his contract year. He's looking for a big payday. He's gonna be out there doing his thing. And then you have a guy like Akeem Hicks, who, again, this is his contract year essentially, too. He's looking for an extension, so he wants to have a big year. So there's a lot of hungry players on that Bears D-line.
Hopefully they can keep up the tenacity that they've been. And lastly, before we'll close out bringing up the work from the safeties. Like I said, I was going to wear my Eddie Jackson jersey today, but for some reason I just have not been happy with him like the past year or two. His play has taken a huge dive, And granted, he did lose Amos, and that's when it really happened because obviously Amos was able to go down to the box and let Jackson slip back and do his thing in coverage, But then you guys got Clinton Diggs, who forced Jackson to go down into the box and play that role as well too. How do you see the work from the safeties coming to help this year?
I think the key with a guy like Eddie Jackson is going back to the Vic Fangio style. Under Chuck Pagano, like you said, he was up tighter more. Pagano played more single high stuff. He wanted his guys a little more doing more man-to-man coverage, and that brought Eddie Jackson up to cover the guys in the slot or to cover the tight ends more one-on-one, as opposed to with the Fangio system and with Coach Sean Desai now. You'll see more too high looks. You'll see him back more. You'll see him able to let his instincts take over, and he has really good instincts. So that should lead to more interceptions, much more tip passes, if that's the case. But also, you got to look at Eddie Jackson's tackling. He has not had the best tackling numbers the last couple of years. I don't know whether it's just he wasn't comfortable in the Pagano system, if that was in his head. But he's had some issues in preseason this last game as well. So, his tackling ability is something that definitely Bears fans are going to want to keep an eye on as the season progresses. But if his physicality is back, I think his mental aspects is there because he's comfortable in this defense.
So with that being said, as we get ready to close out, we did take a beating today in preseason. What do you expect from our final game against the Tennessee Titans, our final preseason game?
It's so weird with just 3 games this year. Then of course they have the bye week. That third game was always considered the dress rehearsal. So now is that going to be where this was the dress rehearsal, which we did see Andy Dalton play in the whole first half. How are they going to treat it? Moving in, are they going to give all their starters the rest? If that's the case, then we should see a bunch of Nick Foles, because I can't see them wanting to play Justin Fields too much if that's how they're going to do it. But again, if this last game, I want to see some of the young players step up. I want to see, guys like Caleb Johnson, undrafted free agent out of Houston Baptist. He had an up and down game today, but he has some potential. I want to watch guys like Charles Snowden at outside linebacker. I want to see how some of these young guys, take the opportunity in the last preseason game and show this coaching staff, what they have. They want to make their case for the final roster, and they also want to make their case for a practice squad spot. And it's not only just for the Bears, because this tape of these last game, all the teams are going to look at it. So, if a guy like Brian Johnson, the backup kicker, if he has another big game, against the Titans next week, he's gone. These guys are not only fighting for their job with Chicago, they're fighting for a job to stay in the NFL. So that, to me, that last preseason game, it's always fun because those young guys really ball out.
That being said, Lester, I greatly appreciate you for coming to Line for Line and giving us a very productive conversation. We definitely look forward to you more, as you're like one of the great sources that we do see displaying great Bears information and true, authentic information as well. So we definitely look forward to speaking with you and interacting with you going forward, sir.
Appreciate it. Anytime.
You calling or you listening, tune in every week. Line for line. Oh yeah, I'm going line for line.